So what is the book of Exodus? That's what we want to dig into today. And I think this is really crucial. Now, if you haven't broke down yet Genesis, we got an episode on that. It helps bring it all together for you. Now, as a reminder, Genesis spans more time than the entire Bible combined. And it's broken into 3 sections. First section, early creation, the universe, how this world was created by one God. Then we're going to start digging into, in chapters all the way up through 11, a lot of the early legends, oral traditions that were passed down. And these span lots of different stories. Cain and Abel, Noah and the flood, the Tower of Babel. And by the time we got into chapter 12 through the end of Genesis, helped us span 4 generations of one family that God chose. It started with Abram, who later was named Abraham, his son Isaac, then Jacob, who later is renamed Israel, and the 12 sons that later become the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, if you remember, we focused on one son, Joseph, and Joseph, during a famine, ends up in Egypt after a lot of things happen, and he ends up being responsible for saving his family, all 12 of those brothers, their families, and what becomes the 12 tribes. And they're all in Egypt now, living the good life. And that is where Genesis ends and Exodus begins. But now some time has passed. That Pharaoh that loved Joseph, that they were connected, he's gone. New Pharaoh's in, and all of a sudden, these 12 families, these 12 tribes, they're growing massively. And Egypt is a little worried. So what do they decide to do? Enslave them. Israel's immediately oppressed. And when we say Israel, we're talking about the 12 tribes of Israel, or those 12 families. And where we find ourselves is Pharaoh gives a decree. And what Pharaoh says is, all the male babies that are coming out of Israel, we're getting rid of all of them. And luckily, the Bible tells us of one baby from the tribe of Levi named Moses. His sister, she watches him as he's put in a basket, and Pharaoh's daughter ends up finding this basket with this beautiful little baby Moses, takes him in, and Moses, who's actually an Israelite from the tribe of Levi, ends up growing up in the Pharaoh's daughter's household. The book of Exodus is only really about 81 years. We're starting with the birth of Moses. For the first 40 years, he's growing up inside of Pharaoh's household underneath Pharaoh's daughter. And at around 40 years of age is when he sees one of his own people just getting beat, pulverized. So what does he do? He comes in, interjects, and ends up killing an Egyptian. Now from there, he immediately leaves. He flees for his life. He's around 40 years old at this time, and he flees to Midian. And in Midian, he settles down. Remember, we're only in chapter 2 right now, but he gets married to someone named Zipporah. It's the daughter of the priest of Midian. He becomes a shepherd, starts a whole new life, whole new journey, and all of a sudden he has a son named Gershom. Now Gershom is crazy because it basically means I have become a foreigner in a foreign land. And this is only chapter 2. He spends 40 years there. So by now, Moses is 80 years old when he has this experience and God calls him in a burning bush. God says, you know what? I need you to lead my people, your people, out of Egypt. They're oppressed. It's time for you to go back. And Moses is like, God, I can't do this. I'm not even good at speaking, but are you sure you're choosing the right guy? God finally says, you know what? Why don't you go ahead, bring your brother Aaron. He'll be the spokesperson for you. I'm going to speak to you. You tell Aaron the message, and Aaron will be the spokesperson. So Moses' brother Aaron, he's only about 3 years older than Moses. So at this time, he's around 83. And both of them get ready to speak to Pharaoh. Now remember, we're only in chapter 5 of the book of Exodus, and there's 40 chapters in this book. So 80 years have passed, 80 years from Moses' birth, those first 40 years in Pharaoh's household, 40 years in Midian, getting married, leaving his life behind, and now at the age of 80, God's sending him in chapter 5 back to Egypt. And he has one message: let my people go. Now we know there's been lots of famous movies, 10 Commandments, all of those things, and that is where the 10 plagues come up. in this epic showdown between Moses, his brother Aaron, and the Pharaoh. So chapters 7 through 12 is this persuading, this trying to get him to let his people go. And here's where we find out about the 10 plagues. So what are they? First plague, the plague of blood. Next, the plague of frogs. Plague number 3, the plague of lice, or what we also call gnats. Plague 4, the plague of flies. Plague number 5, it's a plague on livestock. Plague number 6, boils. Plague 7, hail. Plague number 8, the plague of locusts, a swarm of locusts. Plague 9, darkness. And the 10th plague that happens is the firstborn of everyone in Egypt is going to die. But here is also an epic thing that happens. And remember, we're only around chapter 12 right now of Exodus. We're going to now hear about the Passover. Now, the Passover is a very, very, very famous holiday, and this is where it originates. If they smear some blood over the doorpost, the angel of death that's coming through that night is going to pass over their house, and no one in that house will die. Now we're finishing up chapters 12. Now it's time to let the people go. Pharaoh finally agrees, and then he changes his mind, and he's chasing them. Now this is where that epic moment that we've all heard about, the crossing of the Red Sea, starts to happen. Chapter 14, they're trying to get away, they're trying to escape. Pharaoh and the armies are all coming after them, and God parts the Red Sea so they can all make it across safely. And as he does that, boom, right when they get through, and Pharaoh and the chariots are headed right after him, the waters go back and basically knock out the Egyptians. So now they're free. And we're just only finishing chapter 14. Chapter 15 is actually kind of cool because Moses' sister, Miriam, his older sister, is mentioned. This is the same sister that watched over him in a little tiny basket going down the Nile when he was a baby to save his life. And here in chapter 15 of Exodus, it says she was a prophetess and she helped lead this amazing song to praise God in Exodus 15. So where are we going here? The hardships. You see, in 16 and 17, they think that everything's going to be great. They're finally free. God's going to take them to the promised land. Except they have no food and they have no water. So immediately they're complaining. They don't like it. What are they going to do? This is horrible. Why did God even bring them out there if this is what it's going to be like? God starts sending down what they call manna, or bread from heaven. He even gets quails to come literally out of nowhere. And when they're dying of thirst, he tells Moses to hit a rock and water comes out of the rock. He's literally saving them at every single moment. Now, as they're headed to Mount Sinai, so the Amalekites, a neighboring area, knows they've just escaped and wants to attack them, wants to rush in, and they do. This is where we first hear this name, Joshua, an amazing name of the Bible, who actually has a book in the Bible named Joshua. Joshua is going to be the leader of the army, and Moses is going to say, Joshua, go gather the people. We're going to have to fight the Amalekites. Now, a great story happens here. As they're fighting, whenever Moses' hands are up and he's holding up his staff, the Israelites are winning. Whenever his arms get tired and they start to fall, the Israelites start losing. So two people come to hold up Moses' hand for this battle until they win the entire thing. Now by this time we're in Exodus 18 and something is starting to happen. The people are starting to complain. And this is where Moses' father-in-law, he comes into town and he basically says, listen, Moses, right now you have to be over every single argument. Why? What if we changed that? What if you set up a group of elders to help you decide things? They can handle the smaller stuff, you can handle the bigger stuff. So Moses does just that. Now by chapters 19, we're arriving at Mount Sinai. This is where God has been leading them to for this exact moment. Now remember, only a very small period of time has passed. We're talking about maybe a month or two. So the first chapters is literally 80 years. And when we're talking chapters 5 to chapters 40, it's only about a year that these 35 chapters are actually spanning. And this is where the covenant of Mount Sinai, or a covenant from God, comes to the Israelites. He's going to give them the 10 commandments here. He's going to let them know, listen, if you follow me and if you stay with me and obey my commandments, you will be my special people. I will love you like crazy. And in Exodus 20, this is where we start getting in right into the 10 commandments. The only problem is, as Moses is up there, as he's getting these, as he's sharing them with the people, God also says, I want you to make a tabernacle, an area. This is going to be the area where people can come to give offerings, where high priests can go into, a holy of holy place where you'll even build an Ark of a Covenant. But while Moses is up there for 40 days and 40 nights, the people start to be like, yo, is Moses coming back? What's going on? This is insane. And as that happens, they start talking to Moses' older brother and say, we want you to build us a new God. We're going to give you all our gold and build a calf. So Moses comes down after this has happened, sees this golden calf, and he has these 2 tablets, these stone tablets with the 10 commandments written on them, and he literally shatters them. Why? Because Israel broke God's covenant, and now these tablets are broken. God's going to send a plague as a punishment just because of the fact that he literally just set this up. We're not talking years have passed. We're talking days, weeks, months have passed, and they're already turning away from the God that saved them. So Exodus 33 to 34, a new set of tablets. God's going to tell Moses, like, hey, you're going to go down there, you're going to build this tabernacle, we're going to make this happen, you're going to build this Ark of the Covenant, and we're going to get 2 new tablets and put it back inside. We are renewing this covenant. Aaron is also a little bit earlier named as one of the first high priests. They're from the tribes of Levi, so Aaron's going to be the first high priest, and his sons will be that line, and Aaron's family line will be the priesthood. And then in those last chapters, we're building this tabernacle. Now, this is sometimes where people get a little bit lost because they're going, what is this tabernacle? It's a portable sanctuary. Right now we have churches, we have houses, we have mobile homes. A mobile home drives and goes place to place. This tabernacle is something that's meant to get up and move, be transported, but where people can go in and give offerings. There's actually 3 sections of this tabernacle. The outer courtyard, it's the largest area. Everyone in Israel can go inside. Here they can bring all their offerings, all their sacrifices. Now inside of the outer courtyard, it's this holy place. And this is an inner room that's only for priests. Only priests can come in here. And inside of that is what's called the Holy of Holies. It's the holiest place there is, and I know that sounds funny. It's the innermost part, and only the high priest, only that one high priest, only once a year on the Day of Atonement is allowed to go inside there. And that is also where the Ark of the Covenant is. So what's this Ark of the Covenant? It's in an Indiana Jones movie. People have heard of it, but not people really don't know what it is. And it's this sacred container, and inside of the container is where those 2 tablets, those 10 commandments are. Because remember, this is God's promise with the people, and they're stored inside of that. And it's a symbol of how God communicates. That's what this ark is. It's the most sacred objects of all the objects. And wherever they go, the Israelites, they're going to take this tabernacle with them, so that wherever they go, they're going with God. So in Exodus chapters 35 through 39, they're gathering the materials, they're building this tabernacle, this mobile sanctuary. And in chapter 40, it's just being completed. It's finished. Now remember, in just the first 5 chapters, we spent 80 years. And for the last 35, it's been this 1 year. This trip to Mount Sinai, getting to Mount Sinai, getting the 10 commandments, finding out about this tabernacle they have to build. And now that Exodus is ending, they're going to go to the promised land. And what God tells them is, listen, there's going to be a cloud by day that comes over this tabernacle. Whenever it's there, whenever it sits there, you guys don't move. But when that cloud lifts and starts to move, you move with it, and I'm going to guide you. A cloud by day and a fire by night. Next, we are going to talk about that trip to the promised land.